This one's for you, Master Mori. Yes, welcome to the video. I would like to apologize for not uploading for so long. For the last few months, I've just been really busy and stressed, and I just haven't been able to get myself back into YouTube. But anyways, I'm back doing the classes in Angry Birds Epic. I was originally going to continue to make the sequel parts of this video shown above, but I found that doing that will take too long to make and for you guys to watch through. So instead, I'm going to make all of the classes in a single video, you know, like a normal person. So let's get into the video. So the lowest ranking class at number 30 is going to be Lightning Bird. So it is better to focus one target at a time instead of trying to take out all the enemies at once, because as you take out more and more enemies, the battle gets progressively easier. So for example, when you focus one target at a time, you would go from something like 5 enemies down to 4, then 3, 2, and you get the point. But if you try to kill them all at once, then you have to deal with 5 enemies throughout the entirety of the battle until you win. And Lightning Birds and many of Chuck's classes have very spread out attacks, which in general make them worse than stronger, more focused attacks. And the fact that Lightning Bird's Dispel is also not completely reliable can get you into some sticky situations. I also don't think Lightning Speed is good because it usually relies on RNG to even hit the right target. The only time it could be good is against a boss with a charge attack with no other minions on the field, because you could use Lightning Speed on treasure hunters to constantly decrease their charge meter and basically perma-stun them. But other than that, it doesn't really have any practical uses. Next one on the list is going to be Mage, number 29, another one of Chuck's classes. And once again, has a very spread out attack, and while it does a little more than Lightning Bird's, it still suffers from the fact that it doesn't have any extra effects with the attack. And Lightning Shield isn't that bad, but you usually need to use classes like Avenger or Princess to force the enemies to hit the Lightning Shield in order to get really good value. I also think Lightning Shield is simply outclassed by Cupcake Trap, Counter, and even Ambush from Marksman. And also, the way we're going to be ranking these classes on the tier list is the higher ranking classes are going to be put further on the left. So number 26 in the mostly useless tier is going to be on the far left, while the lower ranking tiers, for example, Lightning Bird at number 30 is going to be on the far right. So anyways, for number 28 is going to be Avenger. So the point of Avenger is to use I Dare You on red in order to get his health low, and then you could deal a lot of damage. However, if all the enemies are focusing red and his health gets low, then red will just die. You can of course use healing abilities on Avenger, but that will cause its attack to go down and you will essentially be contradicting your own strategy. Also, there are quite a few classes that could do just as much, if not more damage than Avenger at its highest potential without having such a big liability. The only situation where I could see anyone using Avenger seriously is if they were pairing it with abilities like Counter, Cupcake Trap, or Ambush, or a Lightning Shield even. So you would use I Dare You and say Cupcake Trap on red, so while Avenger is taking damage and boosting its attack, it's also damaging all the attackers with the Cupcake Trap. However, I would say Knight is actually better with that sort of strategy because it has a stronger protection ability, and Cupcake Trap itself has the ability to focus all enemies onto one bird. Knight's attack also doesn't contradict any sort of healing you could run, so something like Princess could be used without any consequences. You could say that you could just retarget the enemies onto a different bird once red gets low, but eventually, if you keep doing that every time a bird gets low, then all your birds are going to be low, and you're going to be in a sticky situation. So you either run heals and contradict your own strategy, or you do not run heals and potentially put yourself in a sticky situation if you don't end the battle quickly. Oh boy, so these next few rankings are probably going to be quite controversial. So at number 27, I'm actually going to put Wizard. So Wizard has a pretty decent attack, I will say. Although I wouldn't say it's crazy good either, and there are quite a few classes that are just better for dealing damage and or synergizing with other classes. However, my main problem with it is its supportability. I don't think it's controversial to say that Wizard's support sucks. It only has a 1 in 5 chance of stunning the enemy, only fills up 5% of the chili, and only affects one target. And all of those effects only happen if an enemy attacks the energized bird. It is a great candy for the worst supportability, and like I said, it's outclassed by quite a few classes in terms of damage. In fact, Illusionist, which is another one of Chuck's classes, is so much better at dealing damage than Wizard. So, I just don't think it's worth using unless you don't have any other better classes. And by the time you get Wizard, you definitely should have better classes than Wizard. But I do understand why people like Wizard. At number 26, if Wizard wasn't controversial, this one will certainly be, but I'm going to put Cleric. My main problem with Cleric is it never feels like you're net gaining health. The heal you get from Cleric's attack isn't terrible, but it certainly is not strong. But the bigger problem is with Heal Shield. The heal you get from Heal Shield is pretty weak usually, and the way it works is when a bird is attacked, the other two birds net gain 15% of the damage dealt to the attacked bird, and heal to the attacked bird essentially cushions the blow by 15%. However, if one bird gets focused, then the other birds heal basically do nothing, and the Heal Shield doesn't cushion the blow enough to be worth using. I also just can't think of any good synergies that Cleric has, really. So, once again, I understand why people like Cleric, I just disagree. So, that's the mostly useless tier. Those are the classes that I won't be mad at you if you use them, but I wouldn't get why you would over the plethora of better classes. At number 25, the first one in the meta tier is going to be Pirate. Pirate isn't really bad, but it doesn't really have any synergies. And the class is not strong enough by itself to just be slapped into any loadout. It has decent damage, but it doesn't have any extra effects with the attack. And its support is pretty decent, but I like Captains and Tricksters' supports more because I feel like they're more flexible. And classes like Thunderbird, Marksman, and Shulkers cause the target to take more damage, and can give the same or better effect than R. So at number 24 is going to be Spies. Spies' attack is slightly worse than Wizards, but its support is at least mediocre. I mean, how good its support is dependent on how much DPS you're doing, but overall it's definitely much better than Energize. And if healing is what you want though, you should just use like Rainbird or one of Matilda's good classes. Spies is a lot of things. It heals, it does group damage, it also is still a somewhat focused attack, but it's not great at anything. So it's a fun class, it just doesn't synergize with anything and stand out. So the next one is gonna definitely get a lot of hate. The next class is actually gonna be a fan favorite. So at number 23, it's gonna be Paladin. So to start off, I don't get the point of its support. You're giving a bird protection, but it does not give red protection, and red is gonna be tanking for that bird. So why are you giving a bird protection when it's not gonna be hit and taking advantage of the damage reduction? It only makes sense to use the support on red, and I don't like the lack of flexibility with that support. And also, I mean, its heal and attack is fine, but I would rather run like Guardian or Samurai, because their defensive capabilities are so good. I believe that they would be able to preserve much more health. Maybe not that much, but more health than Paladin is healing. And if you take away Paladin's healing, it's not really anything. Like I said, its support isn't very practical, and healing is really all it got. And even in the healing department, it's nothing crazy. I mean, I understand that attacking and healing at the same time is very common in this game, but I would rather run a class that could provide better defense and pair it with another class that would do a better job of healing, like Rainbird or one of Matilda's good classes. The only strategy I would use Paladin in is with rogues, and that strat I would put Devotion and Cupcake Trap on red. Similarly to how I described it with Knight earlier. And I'll kind of just run whatever I want for the Thunderbird. But other than that, I just don't think it has too many applications. I actually like Wizard more than Paladin, but I think it's more practical to use Paladin over Wizard. So, these rankings aren't necessarily how much I like the classes, it's how good they are. So, the next one on the list is going to be Cannoneer. So, at number 22, Cannoneer is decent, but it does not really outclass anything that is similar to it. Like, I would say Cannoneer's counter is better than Marksman's ambush, but Marksman is so good offensively and synergizes with quite a few things that Marksman is overall much better. And Guardian and Cannoneer also have pretty identical attacks, and I would say Cannoneer's is slightly better because it can synergize better with Priest and Marksman. However, I think Guardian is much better than Cannoneer because it has such a solid support. And let's not forget that Cupcake Trap blows counter out of the water. So it's just not well-rounded enough to outclass really any of the similar classes to it, like Rogues or Guardian. So the last class in the meta tier is going to be Treasure Hunters at number 21. So it's a really fun class, but I only really use it against bosses that have a charge attack. I mean, it has a really high damage attack, but its effect doesn't do anything to normal enemies. And I also don't think its support is very good because it only affects one target per use. And while it's better to prevent the bird from getting the negative effect in the first place and deflecting it back on the opponent instead of waiting to cleanse it yourself, all of the cleansing abilities for the birds, which are Healing Raid, Royal Aid, and Cheer, provide some sort of extra effect that can make the support ability better than Untouchable, and in most cases they are. And by the way, I had to use screenshots from my own game for Treasure Hunter, Shulker, Sea Dog, and Frost Savage, so that's why some of the numbers and images are a bit different. So the first class in the decent tier is going to be quite an interesting one, because this class, from what I've heard, is quite hated by the community, and I definitely know why, but I actually think it's quite decent. So number 20 is going to be Knight. I actually put Knight at number 26 in my past ranking video, the bottom 5. However, I've thought about it a bit, and I use Knight way more than any of the classes below it, and even some of the ones above it, because it's so good against bosses and works so well with Cupcake Trap and Royal Aid. So if you're good against a boss that attacks one enemy at a time, you could use Protect to prevent a huge amount of damage. And you could use Royal Aid to constantly be healing red back to full health. So while the boss is constantly attacking red, or maybe a different bird in some cases, you're constantly using Protect to lower the damage and healing back to get red back to a healthy amount of health, and you basically keep looping that until you win. And when you're going against more enemies, you would run something like Rogues and put Cupcake Trap along with Protect and Royal Aid on whatever bird you want to, and from there you basically just choose the battle. So it doesn't have a ton of strategies with it, but the ones it does work with are quite good and have a decent amount of applications. And the next class is going to be Berserker at number 19, where he just broke the 1/3 mark through the tier list. So Berserker has a really high damage potential and is capable of dealing group damage with its support to clear out weaker enemies. So overall, offensively, it's quite good. It just doesn't really have any synergies, similarly to like Pirate and Spies. However, this class is stronger by itself than those classes, so that's why I'm ranking it much higher. At number 18 is going to be Trickster. The Dispel on its main attack is pretty nice, and its support ability is good utility. However, while I would consider it a support bird, it once again just doesn't really have any specific synergies. A lot of these classes feel like they should be stronger and should work better. However, it has to fit into specific strategies. If it does not do that, then what's the point of using it? Because it's not a very good idea to just throw in random classes into a loadout. You want to have a strategy. And classes like Trickster, Spies, Pirate, Berserker, they all don't seem like bad classes, and I really wouldn't say they're bad. They just don't work well in strategies. So next up is going to be number 17, which is Sea Dog. So Sea Dog is kind of an interesting class. It works really well in loadouts that are really aggressive. It could deal really high amounts of damage from the get-go and make swift and decisive victories. However, if you're unable to win quickly and take too much damage, you're going to have a bad time. Obviously, the more damage Sea Dog takes, the less damage it will do, but also the aggressive classes it works well with, like Rogues and Illusionists, are not very tanky. And sometimes in Arena, the opponent just won't attack the low health Sea Dog, and it just sits there doing 5 damage at a time, and never gets knocked out to reset its stats when it gets revived. So, at number 16 is going to be Frost Savage, another one of Bob's classes. So, its support is pretty decent in the caves and campaign mode, and an absolute nuisance to the opponent in Arena. I just really don't like the fact that Frost Savage attack is only good when something is stunned, and generally there's only going to be 1 or 2 targets stunned at a time. And it will not necessarily be the right targets either. I mean, it could also have a hard time against enemy cleanses and dispels to the freezing barrier. So at the official halfway mark of this tier list, the middle of the road and the first one in the good tier is going to be Guardian. So, Guardian's attack, which lowers the enemy's damage, and its support ability can really help prevent tons of damage to your birds. It's just another one of those birds that has no strong direct synergies. I mean, it's never really bad in any loadout either. So if you really want to slap this into a loadout, you can. It's just never gonna be bad, it's just never gonna be great either. So I think that's the perfect place to put the little middle of the road class at number 15. Number 14 is gonna be Princess. So Princess is very important and very good in strategies in which you get all the enemies to attack a single bird. You know, example of that is the one with the knight where you use Protect on a bird, you use Cookie Trap on that same bird, and then you keep using Royal Aid on that bird. But other than that, it's very lackluster. You can use it in other strategies, I have, but I have found that in other strategies, why not just use like Druid or Bard or even Priest in some. So it's kind of the opposite of Guardian in that way, where it's really good in one strategy, but very meh in everything else. So next one is going to be number 13, which is Priest. So Priest is extremely hit or miss. In most loadout, it's gonna be terrible. Its heal is barely gonna do anything. 10% isn't as much as you think it would be. However, if you put it in the right loadout, it could potentially be one of the strongest classes in the game. It works well with classes that do multiple attacks in one, such as Samurais, because it allows it to be healed multiple times with one attack from the effect from Angelic Touch. I actually used Priest in my main loadout for the caves. My loadout was Rainbird, Samurai, and Priest, and they are all around level 70. I did use like the add stuff, which boosts your stats, and I did have the elite classes for those three. So it was closer to 86, I guess you could say, with the math that I did. However, with level 86 birds, I was able to beat the level 100 caves. Being able to beat something 40 levels higher than you is insane. And the main reason why is because the defensive setup is so strong. So, for example, Samurai, since it attacks 3 times in one, it will heal for 30% instead of the regular 10. And if you use Spirit Link, you would be healing multiple birds, potentially all of your birds, by 30% of Red's health with one attack. And then I also use Rainbird, like I said, in that strategy. And say you use Spirit Link on all of your birds. And since Healing Rain already heals all of the birds by a certain amount, it multiplies the heal by 3 for all the birds. So I think the heal is something like 1400 or something. And that goes up to like 4200 with all of them Spirit Linked. So that's how good the healing ability can be with Priest. However, like I said, it's very hit or miss. And I don't think I could put it higher up on the list just because it's too inflexible and reliant on other birds. I would really love to put this in like the top 10 or even top 5, but objectively, it's not the best thing ever. But there certainly are really good strategies with it. I suggest that you try them. So, next one is going to be another one of Matilda's class, the third one in a row actually. It's going to be Druid, at number 12. So, it has a pretty nice healing ability, and its attack is pretty decent. You can tag multiple enemies with the Thorny Vine effect to deal pretty decent damage at the end of your turns. I just think its heal is outclassed by a couple other supports abilities like Rainbirds or Bards. So don't get me wrong, it has a really good healing ability, but there are better ones. And number 11 is going to be Shulkers, the last one in good tier. Shulker's main attack allows his target to be more susceptible to attacks for the next few turns, which can allow you to get so much more damage on a target. And Shulkers would probably be higher up on the list if there were more good debuffs to pair with Tricksy Trick. The only debuffs that are good with Tricksy Trick are Guardian and Cannoneers, they have the same one, Druids, and Priest. Priest is kind of an interesting one because you would have to run a non-illusionist Chuck class. So basically what you do, you would use Tricksy Trick on Priest, you spread the Angelic Touch effect everywhere, and since Chuck attacks everything, he gets healed by all of the Angelic Touch effects. And you would use Spirit Link to spread the heal around, and basically every time Chuck attacks, you get healed a ton. So that's a good combo with it, but overall, in most cases, either the effect that you're going to be using with Tricksy Trick already is applied to all enemies, or it just isn't useful to put it on every single enemy. There's no point. So, in most cases, the support ability for Shulkers is going to be a dead support. You're not going to use it. And I also think Marksman's debuff in most cases is better than Shulker's debuff, despite it being so good. So, in most cases, it has a dead support, and it's outclassed by another one of Blue's classes, surprisingly. So, at number 10 is going to be Captain. So, Captain, from what I understand, is unanimously liked by the community. Having an attack with a reliable dispel, Lightning Bird, is just really useful. I think I mentioned that with Tricksters, and Whip Up grants a massive 60% damage buff. Sure, you take 10% damage, but it's actually not as much as you'd expect. You could say Captain is one of those classes that doesn't directly synergize with anything, and that's kind of true, but it's just so good that you could just throw it into any loadout and it'll be at least pretty good. At number 9 is Thunderbird. I will say that Shulker's attack is better than Thunderbird's because it is more focused and gives a stronger debuff. However, I'm putting Thunderbird in a higher spot because it has a much stronger support. Like Freezing Shield, it is an absolute nightmare to go against in Arena if you don't have any dispels. And it is also pretty strong in the campaign and caves. At number 8 is going to be Marksman. So I will say that Marksman's ambush ability isn't that good. It can be decent against some bosses, but it really isn't anything impressive. But oh my goodness, its attack. The debuff given by Marksman is absolutely insane. In most cases, it's better than Weak Spot, one of the best debuffs in the entire game. And when you pair that debuff with classes like Priest, Samurai, Stone Guard, and even Cannoneer, Marksman's debuff would just shred. So to put in perspective, say you use Samurai with Weak Spot. Weak Spot causes a target to take 35% more damage. I'm just going to go to 33% or 1/3 because that's an easier number to do mental math with. So my Samurai normally does 3,300 and 1/3 of 3,300 is 1,100. So 3,300 plus 1,100 is 4,400. That's how much damage my Samurai does with the Weak Spot debuff. Now the way Marksman's debuff works is it works per attack and with a set number. And Samurai attacks 3 times in one use. So my Marksman's debuff does 1,300 damage at its level. So the Samurai itself does 3,300 damage, and since it attacks 3 times, it does 1,300 times 3. 1,300 times 3 is 3,900. 3,300 plus 3,900 is 7,200. The debuff is dealing more damage than the Samurai itself. Like what? That's not okay. In most cases, though, it's about on par with Weak Spot or slightly better, because most birds don't attack multiple times in one. Most just activate the debuff once. So it'll just be 1,300 times 1. But still, that's insane. So it's either amazing or really great. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. The only problem you might run into with this sort of strategy with the Samurai and stuff is if the Marksman dies early, because the blues in general don't have a lot of health. But if you're really that concerned about that, you could use Ambush to help protect the Marksman. As weird as that sounds. Honestly, if Marksman had a better support ability that could be considered pretty good, I'd probably put it top 5 or top 3, because Marksman's got the offense nailed down. So at number 7, with a slightly less interesting class, but a slightly better class, it's going to be Bard. So Bard does heavy damage. There we go. That was a weird lag spike. It does heavy damage. It has a chance of stunning. And also has a really good heal. I would say its heal is better than Druid's because of its heal over time. Also, how Druid works is that the bird that's targeted by regrowth by Druid is healed much more than the other 2 birds. So Druid has a primary and a secondary heal. However, Rainbird's and Bard's heal affects all birds by the same amount. So the Druid's main heal is stronger than Rainbird's and Bard's heal, but the Druid's secondary heal is weaker than the other 2's heal. And I personally like the consistency of the Bard's and Rainbird's heal more than the inconsistency of Druid's. So that was just a thing I'd like to comment about. It's just an overall great class, nothing really wrong with Bard. The last class in the gray tier, before we get into the top 5, this class is quite interesting, because it's really good at two completely separate things. So this is going to be Rogues. So Rogues can deal high damage to multiple enemies at once by applying the sticky goo in multiple enemies. I wrote that in the script. Well, anyways, it is especially nice that the effect can ignore defensive abilities such as defensive formation from Samurai. And if you're running a loadout in which you want your opponents to focus on one of your birds, similarly to the ones you would run with like Princess and Knight and such, you're gonna run Rogues and use Cupcake Trap. You not only punish your enemies heavily for attacking the Cupcake Trap, but you force the enemies to attack that bird so that you are guaranteed to get value out of the Cupcake Trap. Just great. Okay, so we're in our top 5. Now, the classes I have chosen to be the top 5, I feel are not the classes most people would put in the top 5, not even close. I mean, for the most part, I think these classes are liked, but I don't think most of these classes would be put in most people's top 5s. So, you could say that my top 5 is kind of questionable, and it doesn't really help my case that my number 5 slot is a class that I've never actually played before. So for number 5, we have Stoneguard. So, like I said, I've never actually used Stoneguard before. I've only seen gameplay of it and the in-game description of it. However, just by looking at it, the class looks really good in terms of offense. If you see here, this level 36 does about 2,000 base damage, and it does 150% damage when it hits something with a debuff. That equals about 3,000 total damage. Tied for my highest level class is my Samurai, and if I were to put on the normal Samurai helmet, you will see my Samurai does 3,300 normally. My point is that its damage is insane. Like, the Samurai is twice its level, yet when the Stone Guard hits something with a debuff, it does almost just as much damage. Now, Samurai is not exactly known for its damage, but come on, it's double its level. And Samurai isn't a pushover in damage either. So, just for its sheer insane offensive ability, I'm putting it this high. And it's not like there aren't any classes to give debuffs that would synergize with Stone Guard. Two great examples of synergy with Stone Guard are Priest and Marksman. I will say though that I don't think Ancestral Protection is good. From what I've seen, the description is a little misleading, and it doesn't actually protect your bird. It just gives the minus 40% damage to any attackers after the bird has been hit. And that doesn't really help in a lot of situations because you usually want to reduce their attack, before they attack. But I just can't get over how insane the damage is. So next up is going to be number 4, which is Illusionist. So the nice thing about Illusionist is that it can deal heavy damage to one target while also dealing some damage to everything else. So it's the only Chuck class that doesn't have the problem of a spread attack. Mirror Image is also a nice way of allowing your burst to deal more damage. It's a 50% damage increase. It is a weaker attack buff than Captain's Whip Up, but it also doubles the chance that your weapon abilities such as Critical Strike and Stun happen, and you also don't take damage from it. So I would say they are about on par with each other. Mirror Image also works well with Treasure Hunters and I guess Bard too, because it increases the chances that their attack special abilities happen. For the Bard, it's the stun, and the Treasure Hunters, it's the charge meter decrease. So it earns its place at number 4. I really like Illusionist. So, I've been thinking about this number 3 slot for a while, and how people would react to it. And the only reaction I could think of is, have you lost your mind? And that is very possible. But, in my opinion, Rainbird earns the number 3 slot. So, in my opinion, Rainbird has the best heal in the game. So, let's talk about sheer health. So, in terms of single target healing, Princess is on top, of course, but in most cases, the group heal is much better. So, in terms of group heal, Bard definitely is on top. You know, it has the over time effect heal, plus the initial heal. And then there's Druid and Rainbird. Druid's primary heal heals more than Rainbird's, but Rainbird heals more than the secondary heals. And I like the consistency much more of Rainbird. So I would say his heal is better than Druid. So I would say, in terms of group healing, he's number 2. But I just said that Rainbird has the best heal. So the thing that makes Rainbird's heal the best isn't the sheer health, it's the cleanse. It's the only group heal in the game that cleanses, besides Matilda's chili, but I am not counting that in this situation. So, cleanse can get you out of so many sticky situations pretty much anywhere in the game. The top 9 classes of this ranking list all give debuffs and or heavily benefit from debuffs on the enemies. So in Arena, you can really compete against the higher level classes with Rainbird just by constantly being able to cleanse all their debuffs. But another thing is, even in the caves, there's always gonna be at least one recurring enemy that gives a debuff. So, say what you will about Rainbird's attack being bad, because it kind of is. But at least Rainbird can be healing and cleansing as its acid rain deals damage. Remember how I said earlier that I beat all of the level 100 caves with Rainbird, Priest, and Samurai all being around level 86? I would not have been able to do it if it did not have the cleanse. I just would not have. So, I know it's kind of crazy putting Rainbird this high, but it's really close to my heart. I love Rainbird. I've been using it for years. It's the second highest, no, not second, it's tied for the highest level class that I have. Tied for the number 2 slot. Prepare for the drum roll. You ready for the drum roll? I'm too lazy to put it. You can supply it yourself. Are you doing it? Okay. So the number 2 slot is going to be Samurai. So let's start off with the main con of Samurai. Its attack doesn't give any extra effect. So that does kind of suck. But you don't really need it when you have 2 amazing combos with it. Samurai Marksman, Samurai Priest. You can even do both if you want and absolutely obliterate everything in your path while healing like crazy. And then there is Defensive Formation. Defensive Formation can allow you to regain your footing if you're behind or help you stay ahead of your enemies with its insane protective abilities. I will say the fact that it only lasts 1 turn can be annoying. When I was trying to beat the level 100 caves and a bit lower, I would not be able to attack much with red as I would constantly be having to reapply the defensive formation buff as my level 86 birds can't take many hits from the level 100 pigs. So that kind of sucked. But in most situations where you're going against someone your level or maybe a little higher than you, it shouldn't be a problem. Especially in Arena, where the battle kind of is never at full power because there's usually always at least 1 bird knocked out, usually 2 if you're smart. So you don't always need the defensive formation up. So overall, just the combos you could do with it, plus the sheer insane defensive ability, is just why I use it so much, and why I put it this high up. So, number 1 is gonna be Witch. Shoot. So, the fact that you can stack the Witch's buff is absolutely insane. I mean, of course, the buffs do not last forever, but the fact that the support ability gives an attack buff and a health boost, and it could stack twice, is just not fair. It also deals heavy damage, and can heal itself a little bit too. So, yeah. This is the tier list. I expect a lot of arguing with me in the comments, and I'm happy to argue, at least civilly. I don't want to be yelling at people through text. I just want a civil conversation about the different classes, and why some rankings are questionable, and what you would rank them. I'm genuinely interested. Also, as proof that I've beat the level 100 caves, here it is, cave 26, the last one. And I used a level 73 Samurai, 73 Rainbird, and 70 Priest. They all round out to 86 when you add the boosts.